and welcome to Philosophy of X here on the Aspect Network. I'm your host, Alex Batts, and I'll be your guide as we take a journey to examine the world of X-Men through philosophy. So, as you can tell by the title, we are once again taking another interlude episode before heading into our discussion of reincarnation and Moira McTaggart for next week's episode. There are a couple of reasons for this, but the first one being that, full disclosure, I just don't have the Moira episode fully prepped yet, and I want it to be really quality. Secondly, though, it's now been a week since the release of Uncanny X-Men 700, which officially marked the end of the First Krakoan Age. I've had a week to sit with it and digest, and I want to talk about it, so that's what we're going to do. Spoiler warning ahead for this issue and the Krakoan Age as a whole. I don't know how deep into specifics that I'm going to get. I'm not going to go off of the script or anything, so I'm not sure. This is just going to be a casual sit down and talking through my thoughts. I have a couple of bullet points that I know I want to hit, but that's it. Anyways, spoiler warning out of the way and that prelude out of the way, let's jump in. So, Uncanny X-Men number 700/X-Men 35 released last week, and this was the final issue of the Krakoan Age. The first Krakoan Age, I should say. So this issue, if you listened to my episode 2 weeks ago, I was very much not happy with the way that it was looking like the Krakoan era, the first Krakoan Age, was going to wrap up. I had a lot of qualms, a lot of problems with Fall of X as a whole, as like an initiative, as a wave of this era. And I still do stand by like pretty much all of those. I think the Fall of X could have been handled a lot better. That said, I was incredibly pleasantly surprised with this issue. I assumed it was pretty much telegraphed that this was going to be like an epilogue issue of sorts, where they kind of like tie up all the loose ends, cross the T's, dot the I's on Krakoa, and figure out ways to put everything back in the box. That way we can have the relaunch, which is coming. And it was that, but it did it in a way that was much more satisfying and left me a lot more content than I would have expected it to going in, and especially with the way that the last couple months of comics for X-Men have been. It did something really, really interesting, I think, with the premise of Krakoa and the use of the White Hot Room, and how these concepts have evolved and been utilized for the X-Men lore. Because at this point, you know, Fall of the House of X had wrapped up, Rise of the Powers of X had wrapped up, those stories had ended, but there were still the questions of like, why are none of the mutants in the relaunch concerned with Krakoa? How is this island just still here, and none of them, how are they okay with going back to the status quo that they had before, when Krakoa was so earth-shattering and groundbreaking and had all of these new ideas and things that they could do? And this issue, I think, did as satisfying a job as it could answering that and leaving me not angry, which I was very much expecting to be with this. As you know, if you've listened to any of the episodes where I talk about Krakoa at all, I did not want this era to end. I still wish that it was not ending. I think that it could have gone on for 15, 20 years. Indefinitely, honestly. I think there's so much potential here. I've talked about that. But this is serialized comics, and nothing lasts forever. Everything gets reverted back to the status quo, because that is unfortunately the way of things. And I think that the way that it was done here is the best that I could have asked for. It leaves the door open in interesting ways and exciting ways. It also gives a lot of closure to a couple of the dangling plot threads, or the what could be described as plot holes that we might have had at the end. It doesn't answer everything. There are a handful of major things from the era that just were not answered and are left unresolved, but that's comics. That's not a Krakoan era specific problem where there are questions that are posed on a comic page and they just never get answered. That's part of writing serialized comics for the big two, is that writers plant these seeds and they leave these things for maybe a future writer to come in and do something with, or maybe not. That's how it works. A lot of what happened in Krakoa was writers coming in and taking these ideas that were planted so far beforehand and them having an interest in that idea and saying, okay, I can do something with this now. And so I think that while it is somewhat disappointing that some of those threads are still left dangling, you never know what might happen in the future with future stories and future writers, and so that's good. I think that the promise of Krakoa itself and the possibility of a second Krakoan Age is not guaranteed, but it is implied and it is possible. This issue makes a big point of saying that this ended the first Krakoan Age, and calling it the first implies there will be a second. There are characters in the book as well that do, it's very much their mission to make it to where Krakoa becomes a thing again. And so that does fill me with hope. I also, being able to sit with it for a week and mull it over and think it over. There was also 2 days ago, the X-Men Monday, 2 days ago at the time that this episode comes out. There was an X-Men Monday interview with Jordan D. White, who was the editor for this line for the entire Krakoan Age, where he was talking about the fact that what happens in a lot of comics like this is that people who read books as they come out and read stories from a specific era, and then maybe that thing gets dropped or something changes, they will then not grow up is a simplified way of saying it, but they will end up working in the comics realm, and then they, since they loved that thing, will then want to write stories related to that thing. And so he's said that it's his hope that people who read Krakoa and loved Krakoa will eventually, come in and they'll be the ones writing X-Men comics. And, if they loved Krakoa a lot, it would make sense for them to want to find a way to bring that back or to continue that story or whatever it may be. Selfishly, I want that to be me. I mean, writing an X-Men comic would be a dream, and I absolutely, if I had the chance, would find a way to make it about Krakoa, right? That's the first thing that I would do. And I know that I'm not the only person who feels that way. I'm not the only person that has read this era and been like, what I would do to be able to write a comic in this setting or with this idea. And so that fills me with hope. And yeah, the ending, it just wrapped up. The issue was 80 pages. The first almost 50 was Krakoa epilogue closure, which was great. A little odd pacing in it, but overall really good. It hit the beats that it needed to, and did something super, super interesting with the whole concept and the idea. And it was very, very heartwarming to see, and honestly made me really happy. I won't go into specifics, but it was great. And then the back half of the issue, there's 10 pages of Chris Claremont getting to write the Nightcrawler, Mystique, Destiny, and Rogue family dynamic the way that he's always intended to be able to write it, and that was cool to see. And then the rest of the issue was preview setup for the era that's to come, which was admittedly less exciting for me, and whatever, but it has to happen, so that's fine. But yeah, overall I did enjoy the way that they were able to wrap things up. I think that it was well thought out and well done, and it leaves a lot open, which I think is good. But yeah, so that's the main takeaway that I have from the issue. The couple of talking points besides that I wanted to hit, I just have a couple questions that I wanted to kind of touch on that I'd seen some people on Twitter posing and a lot of fans discussing since this issue came out. One was, what did Krakoa mean to you? So what Krakoa meant to me, I thought about this for a while, and the answer that I came up with was that more than anything, it meant potential. And I think it's a bummer because, and I think that most people agree and hold this stance, that the best Krakoan era book was the first one. House of X and Powers of 10 is the best one that we got, which is amazing and also a bummer because the first one, nothing reached that high after that, and it's because it was so new and exciting and just filled with what I was just saying, potential. There was so much there that could be done, and that was the most exciting thing. And that's not to say that the things that came after weren't also great, but I think that's what encapsulates it the most, is that this era and this idea brought with it the feeling that there was a potential for anything, both story-wise and with characters and with collaboration, the way that the X Office was assembled and executed these stories, especially in the early years and even through the end too, even as the office and the creators involved changed. It's a very unique thing to see in the world of Big Two comics, and so I think that is the main thing for me, was that it exemplified the potential of comics and of X-Men comics and a story and of solidarity and seeing these things. And then it also, on a personal level, just it reignited my love for comics in a big way. I was kind of meh or disinterested or just like whatever on reading week to week issues as they were coming out and things like that, and this completely changed that. It got me completely head over heels, just neck deep, submerged completely in X-Men and these characters, and them becoming my favorites. I talked about it 2 weeks ago. This podcast would not exist without Krakoa. I would not be this into the X-Men. I have a tattoo of the Krakoan flower on my hand. Like this, it's literally it's inseparable from me as a person now. It's something where I've gotten incredibly emotional the last week. Every time I think about the fact that the Krakoan era is over, like officially now, it nearly brings me to tears. Fighting them back right now, and it's tough, but I still have those comics. I get to look over to my left right now, and I can see some of my hardcovers and my trades, and like those are there. I can go read them, and they bring me an incredible amount of solace and joy, and it's something that I'm incredibly grateful for. There's a lot of friends that I've like interacted with and met and seen how much it's impacted them and just the community as a whole, that like was incredible to have and to see, and was a gift. So yeah, I mean, Krakoa, what does it mean to me? A lot. It means a lot it means potential, and personally it means a lot. One of the other questions was talking about standout characters from the Krakoan era, and all of the Iraqi are sick. They're all like, Araco is an incredible addition to the X-Men lore, and all of the mutants that were involved there were super, super intriguing. Iska the Unbeaten is a wild premise for a character and a power set. She was incredible. Always want to see more of her. But also personal favorites, Cypher got a huge upgrade in status, I think, and he became one of my favorites. I'm really into linguistics. It's something that I would like to minor in, and so his power is super interesting to me. But then, one of my favorite moments from House of X #1 is when Magneto is saying that they developed their own language, because that's what any culture does. And I think that is super fascinating and a great point, but Cypher being the conduit for that and the speaker for Krakoa was awesome, and he was also always up to something. There's a couple of plot points with him that kind of were left hanging, which is what I was sort of alluding to earlier, and I think that stuff is super, super interesting. There was it was confirmed that Moira was not going to be Hickman's main villain had he done the ending for the era that he had planned on doing from the beginning. And I've seen some people speculate that it might have been Cypher, which would have been wild to see. And I can see how that could happen also, but yeah, Cypher got a huge upgrade and he became one of my favorites because of this era. Loved everything that he was doing and that he was in these books. Exodus also became a huge favorite. Pretty much anyone that Kieran Gillen writes is a pretty solid chance to become my favorite. Gillen can do no wrong to me. But so Exodus was someone who wasn't even on my radar at all before this era, and specifically, I mean, he was involved before, Immortal X-Men started, but he became a big one. Hope Summers, similarly, especially near the back half after Hickman departed, the Hope and Exodus became a pretty incredible 1-2 punch, and Gillen likes Hope a lot, and so her getting more of a spotlight through him and under his pen, she also became a big favorite of mine because of that. And the way that her story wrapped in this, I'm still digesting. I think I like it for the most part. Also still, I won't get into the specifics for those who haven't read, but yeah, Hope became a big favorite. My favorite series from the era, Immortal X-Men, hands down. As I was just saying, I'm a huge Kieran Gillen fanboy, so like duh. But X-Men Red by Al Ewing was also, like, those two books coming out each month was just an unbelievably incredible time. Like, it straight up does not get better than that when you're looking at for comics on the shelf on a month-to-month basis. So those two for sure. Sword, also by Ewing, which was like, it wasn't like the prequel to X-Men Red, but like kind of, I mean, Sword went right into X-Men Red. That one was amazing. I liked, for the events, I loved Sins of Sinister. X of Swords was amazing as well. Judgment Day was fantastic. Inferno was a buck wild way for Hickman to depart the line. It was so good. As I talked about earlier, House of X, Powers of 10, obviously the high point, both good and bad. That is the case. Exterminators was an incredible miniseries. More comics like that should exist. It's just ridiculous fun. That was good. There's a ton of series from this era that I love a lot. I would recommend most of them, not all. Of course, comics aren't perfect. There's going to be some not stellar comics out there, but I think on the whole, there were a lot more hits than misses for me. Favorite writer, as I've said like 3 times now in the last like 2.5 minutes, Kieran Gillen is my favorite writer who worked in the office. Like, besides Hickman, it's Gillen, hands down. Immortal X-Men was incredible. Judgment Day, stellar. Sins of Sinister, partly Gillen, also Ewing. Gillen and Ewing, besides Hickman, were definitely my favorites for writers. Those are the main questions that stood out to me that I wanted to talk about. And then to wrap up, I guess, talking about hope for the future, I'm interested in the relaunch as much as I, like, from a petty angle, don't want to be, because I'm like, no, they took away the thing that I loved, which sucks and hurts. But there are a handful of these books that I'm like, okay, I mean, like the Storm book, I think it sounds great. I think the talent behind all of the relaunch books is stellar. It's amazing, honestly. So that's super exciting. The Storm book, I can't wait to read. Looks great. I still prefer her design from this era, but the new design also is great. Same thing for Jean. I think the Phoenix book is going to be awesome to see, making her a cosmic character on her own and exploring what that is and what that entails, I think is super, super exciting. And so can't wait to see that. Also, similarly to Storm, though, as the new costume is also fantastic, but the costume that Dodderman designed for the Krakoan era is still going to be my favorite Jean look ever, I think, probably. But that's okay. Still a great look. Hickman is coming back to write a Wolverine book with Greg Capullo doing the art, which, like, I haven't talked about it on this podcast a lot because it's not a Batman podcast, but like, I have Greg Capullo's art tattooed on my arm. So yeah, I will be there day one for that. Am I slightly annoyed that Hickman is back writing X-Men literally as soon as the Krakoan era is over? Yeah, a little bit. But it's gonna be cool. Hickman is an incredible, like, I can't praise Hickman enough. So like, and of course I'm gonna be there to read that. And Greg Capullo drawing Wolverine on art, and like, it's Savage Land stuff too. Like, dude, Wolverine with dinosaurs drawn by Greg Capullo, written by Hickman. Like, yeah, I'm there. Of course, that's gonna be great. Some of the other flagship books, we'll see. My interest level varies. My hope for the future, though, is just for good comics. Like, I never want you don't want bad comics, right? Like, I want them to be good. As much as I'm, like, upset and bitter about the Krakoan era, the First Krakoan Age coming to a close, like, I want there to be good X-Men comics. I am absolutely so, as I was saying earlier, neck deep in caring for these characters at this point that, like, I don't want them to be bad books. I want them to be great. So, yeah, I'll be there. I'll read them. I'm excited. But on a longer scale, on a longer timeline, my hope for the future is that we get that second Krakoan Age. You know, that's the ultimate goal. But yeah, I think that's it. I think that those are my thoughts on the end of the First Krakoan Age. So with that, I will bid you adieu. Thank you so much for tuning in to this interlude episode of Philosophy of X. And be sure to be prepared to read the histories of a bunch of different lives, as next week we finally dive into reincarnation and the wild backstory and retcon that is Moira McTaggart. You can follow me online at AP Batman with 2 T's. Please be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect on YouTube and any platform where podcasts can be found. Please give us a like, leave a comment, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss an episode. You can also follow us on Twitter, /X, Instagram, and TikTok at The Aspect Co. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.